You just spent 22 minutes on the phone with your daughter. You asked about her week. You listened to her talk about the kids, about work stress, about a recipe she tried that didn't quite turn out. You laughed together. It was a good call. A really good call. And then, right before hanging up, you said it. You know, it would be nice if you called a little more often. And just like that, the warmth drained out. You could almost hear the shift in her voice. A polite, "Okay, Mom," and then the line went quiet. Here is what 40 years of working with families has taught me, and I need you to hear this clearly. It is not the length of the phone call that determines whether your child calls back. It is not even the content. It is the last thing you say before you hang up. Those final 30 seconds carry more emotional weight than the entire conversation before them. And today, I am going to give you 7 specific phrases that will change how every phone call ends and how soon the next one begins. I have spent over 4 decades in clinical practice, listening to adult children describe their relationships with their parents and listening to parents describe the silence they cannot understand. And one pattern has emerged so consistently that I now consider it a near universal principle. The parents whose children call most frequently are almost never the ones who ask for more calls. They are the ones who make each call feel like a gift, not an obligation. This is not a coincidence. This is attachment theory in action. When a relationship feels safe, people move toward it. When it feels like a test, they keep failing, they pull away. So let me show you how to make every phone call a place your child wants to return to. Before we get to the 7 phrases, I want you to understand why the ending matters so much. Because once you see the science, you will never close a phone call carelessly again. The Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman discovered something called the peak end rule. It works like this. When people remember an experience, they do not average every moment. They remember 2 things: the most emotionally intense moment and the very last moment. That means a 20-minute phone call full of laughter and warmth can be completely overwritten in your child's memory by 30 seconds of guilt at the end. Their brain does not store the whole call. It stores the peak and the ending. That is it. There is also what psychologists call the recency effect. The last piece of information we receive is the one we recall most easily. So when your child thinks about calling you tomorrow, the feeling that surfaces is not minute 7 when you were laughing together. It is the final feeling, the goodbye. This is why the closing phrase is not a small thing. It is the thing. The first phrase is beautifully simple, and it is the one I recommend you start with tonight. This made my day. 4 words. No conditions. No hidden request. Just a clear, honest signal. Your call was a gift to me. Here is why this works at a psychological level. The behaviorist B.F. Skinner demonstrated decades ago that behavior followed by a positive outcome is repeated more frequently. This is called positive reinforcement, and it works in every human relationship, not just laboratories. When your child hangs up and the last thing echoing in their mind is, "This made my day," they have received an emotional reward. The call felt successful. They made someone they love happy. And the next time they are sitting in traffic or waiting at the dentist's office and think about who to call, that positive imprint pulls them toward your number. Now compare that to ending with, "You should call more often." That is not a reward. That is a penalty. It tells your child that no matter how good the call was, it was not enough. And penalized behavior does not increase. It decreases. So tonight, when the call is winding down, just say it. "This made my day," and mean it. Because it did. The second phrase requires one small effort on your part, and that effort is what makes it so powerful. I love hearing about your garden. I love hearing about the kids' soccer season. I love hearing how your new team is going. The key word here is specific. When you name something specific your child talked about, you are sending a signal that goes far deeper than politeness. You are telling them, "I was paying attention. I was not just waiting for my turn to speak. I heard you, and what you shared matters to me." This is what psychologists call active listening, And in attachment theory, it is one of the primary ways we create what is known as felt security. Your child does not just know you love them, they feel it, because you demonstrated it through attention. The opposite, a generic "okay, love you, bye," is not harmful. But it is forgettable. It does not create an emotional anchor. It does not make your child think, 2 days later, "Mom really cared about what I told her." Specificity is the difference between being heard and being processed. So listen during the call. Pick one thing and name it before you say goodbye. This third phrase addresses one of the most common and most invisible mistakes parents make at the end of phone calls. Your child tells you about a challenge, a difficult coworker, a parenting struggle, a financial decision they are wrestling with. And because you love them, because you have lived longer and seen more, your instinct is to help, to advise, to fix. So you end the call with, "Well, have you thought about?" Or, "What you should really do is." I call this the advice trap, and I have seen it quietly damage more parent-adult-child relationships than almost any other pattern. Not because the advice is wrong. Often it is perfectly good advice. But because unsolicited advice, especially at the end of a conversation, communicates something your child hears even when you do not intend it. "You don't think I can handle this on my own." Self-determination theory, one of the most well-supported frameworks in modern psychology, tells us that human beings have a fundamental need for autonomy. Your adult child needs to feel competent and self-directed. When the last thing they hear from you is correction, that need takes a hit. So instead, try this. "You're handling that really well." This phrase closes the call with respect. It says, "I see your challenge and I see your capability. I trust you." That trust, not your advice, is what brings them back. This fourth phrase will feel uncomfortable the first time you say it. It may even feel like you are giving up something. But I want you to stay with me here, because the psychology behind this phrase is among the most powerful in this entire list. No rush to call back, just know I'm here. Now, I understand the fear. If you tell your child there is no rush, will they ever call at all? Will they take you at your word and disappear for months? Here is what decades of research, and my own clinical experience, tells me: the opposite happens. There is a principle in psychology called reactance theory, first described by Jack Brame. It states that when people feel their freedom is being restricted, they instinctively push back, even against things they would have done voluntarily. Your child may have been planning to call you this weekend, but the moment they feel pressured to call, guilt-tripped, monitored, evaluated, the motivation flips. What was a desire becomes an obligation, and obligations get avoided. This phrase disarms that entire cycle. By removing the pressure, you remove the resistance. You transform the next phone call from something your child has to do into something they choose to do. And freely chosen connection is the only kind that lasts. I know this requires trust. I know it requires letting go of control. But I promise you, the parents who learn to hold loosely are the ones whose phones ring most often. The fifth phrase is short, easy to say, and addresses a dynamic that many parents over 60 are navigating, often painfully. Tell Michael I said hello. Give the kids a hug from Grandma. Tell Sarah I hope her presentation goes well. When your child builds their own family, a natural and necessary shift occurs. Their spouse, their children, their household, these become the center of their daily emotional world. This is not a rejection of you. It is the healthy, natural progression of human development. But here is where the pain often begins. Many parents unconsciously position themselves in competition with their child's new family. The phone call becomes a space where the spouse is never mentioned, or where the subtext is, "When are you going to make time for me?" Family systems theory teaches us that families function best when boundaries are respected and subsystems are honored, not threatened. When you end a call by warmly acknowledging your child's spouse, their children, their household, you are sending a profound signal. I am not competing with your family. I am part of it. This is especially important when it comes to daughters-in-law and sons-in-law. They are often the social coordinators of the household, the ones who suggest, "Hey, maybe call your mom this weekend." When they feel included and valued by you, they become bridges. When they feel excluded, they become barriers, not by malice, but by self-preservation. So say their names, ask about their lives, make them feel seen, and watch what happens to your call frequency. The sixth phrase taps into one of the most beautiful psychological forces available to you, and it costs nothing. I was just thinking about that time we got lost driving to the beach house. You were maybe 10. We ended up at that little diner with the jukebox. Nostalgia, when used as connection rather than guilt, is extraordinarily powerful. Research from the University of Southampton's Nostalgia Lab has shown that recalling shared positive memories increases feelings of social connectedness, boosts self-esteem, and generates warmth between people, even when they are physically apart. The key distinction here is between nostalgia as a connector and nostalgia as a weapon. There is a version of this that sounds like, "Remember when you used to come over every Sunday? I miss those days." That is not connection. That is a comparison between then and now, and your child hears the subtext. "You used to be better. You used to love me more." The version that works is the one with no comparison, no agenda. Just a warm image, offered freely. I was thinking about that fishing trip when you caught that enormous bass and your face just lit up. This does something remarkable. It reminds your child that you share a story, a history, an identity that belongs to both of you. Narrative identity theory tells us that our sense of self is built on the stories we tell about our lives, and when you hold those stories with tenderness, you are telling your child, "We are connected by something that cannot be erased by distance or busy schedules." End a call with a shared memory, no guilt attached, and your child carries you with them for the rest of the day. The seventh phrase is not one you will use on every call. In fact, part of its power comes from its rarity. But when you say it, and when you mean it, it may be the most important sentence your child hears all year. "I'm really proud of who you've become." Erik Erikson, one of the most influential developmental psychologists in history, described the final stage of human life as a tension between integrity and despair. Integrity is the feeling that your life mattered, that what you built and who you raised carries meaning. Despair is the fear that it did not. When you tell your adult child that you are proud of who they have become, you are accomplishing two things at once. First, you are giving them something they may never say they need, but almost certainly crave: parental validation that is not tied to achievement, not tied to performance, but tied to their character, who they are, not what they have done. And second, and this is the part I want you to hear, you are affirming your own integrity. You are saying, through your pride, that your years of parenting produced something meaningful. This is not ego. This is the deepest human need to know that your life mattered. Your child will remember this sentence long after the call ends. They will carry it into their workday, into their parenting, into their quiet moments. And the next time they reach for their phone, your number will not feel like an obligation. It will feel like home. Now, before we close, I need to address the other side of this equation. Because it is not enough to add the right phrases if you are still using the wrong ones. There are 3 closing sentences I hear from parents again and again, and every one of them, no matter how justified they feel in the moment, pushes your child further away. The first, "You never call me." This feels like a statement of fact. But to your child, it lands as an accusation, and an unfair one, because they did just call. They are on the phone with you right now. So the message they receive is, "Nothing I do is enough." And when nothing is enough, why try? The second, "I guess you're too busy for your mother." This is passive aggression dressed as humor, and your child recognizes it immediately. It introduces shame into the relationship, and shame does not motivate connection. Shame motivates avoidance. Your child does not hang up thinking, "I should call more." They hang up thinking, "I need a break from this." The third, and this one is the most damaging, I won't be around forever, you know. I understand why you say it. The feeling behind it is real. The fear is real. But this phrase weaponizes mortality, and your child cannot respond to it honestly without either submitting to guilt or sounding heartless. So they go silent, and silence becomes distance. Let these three go. They have never worked. They will never work. Replace them with any of the 7 phrases above, and you will see the difference within weeks. Here is what I want you to take from today. You cannot control how often your children call. You cannot control their schedules, their stress, their spouse's family calendar, or the 1,000 small demands that fill their days. But you can control 30 seconds. The last 30 seconds of every phone call. And those 30 seconds, according to everything we know about memory, emotion, and human behavior, are the seconds that matter most. They are the emotional fingerprint your child carries into the hours and days after the call. They shape the memory. The memory shapes the feeling, and the feeling shapes the behavior. A child who hangs up feeling guilty calls less. A child who hangs up feeling judged calls less. A child who hangs up feeling like they failed calls less. But a child who hangs up feeling valued, respected, trusted, and loved, that child calls back. Not because they have to, because they want to. You do not need to memorize all 7 phrases tonight. That is not the point. The point is this. Pick one, just one that feels true to who you are, and use it the next time you talk to your child. Notice what happens. Notice the tone of their voice as they say goodbye. Notice how long it takes before they call again. Connection is not luck. It is not something that happens to some families and not others. Connection is a skill, and it is a skill you can practice, starting with the very next phone call. You have spent a lifetime loving your children. You have earned every phone call. Now, let that love land gently in the last thing you say. If this video helped you see your phone calls differently, I would be honored if you subscribe to this channel. We are building a community here at Strong Elderly Life, a place where aging is not about losing. It is about growing wiser. Leave a comment below and tell me, which of the 7 phrases are you going to try first? I read every single one. And if someone you know could use these words tonight, share this video with them. Sometimes the smallest shift in language is the biggest shift in a relationship. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and take care of those goodbyes.